They say a heart of stone cannot break. But Seraph had learned that some prisons are built from flesh and bone, wrapped in silence so thick it suffocates, where screams die before reaching your lips, and the loudest sound is the thunder of words you'll never speak. 7 years. 2,555 days since the curse stole her voice, leaving only the hollow echo of what she used to be. She stood in the shadowed corner of the Moonspire Citadel's grand washing hall, her hands submerged in scalding water that had long since stopped registering as pain. The other Omegas chattered around her like songbirds, their voices a constant reminder of everything she'd lost. They called her the Silent One, sometimes with pity, often with suspicion, always with the unspoken question: what Omega survives a rogue attack, but loses only her voice? If they knew the truth, they'd understand why silence was mercy. The night the rogues came, they hadn't just attacked her village, they'd awakened something ancient inside her, something that predated the neat categories of Alpha, Beta, Omega. Her screams that night had shattered stone, boiled rivers, and killed everything within a half-mile radius. Friends, family, rogues, innocence. Her voice had made no distinction. The curse that followed wasn't punishment. It was salvation for everyone else. Now at 24, she wore her voicelessness like armor, scrubbing the palace linens in the pre-dawn darkness while maintaining the careful fiction that she was just another broken Omega seeking sanctuary. The Moonspire laws were clear. All Omegas received protection within the Citadel walls. No one questioned a traumatized survivor who worked twice as hard as anyone else and never complained. What they didn't know was that her silence wasn't just absence, it was a dam holding back a weapon that had only ever brought death. Every day, she felt it pressing against her sealed throat. The song, ancient and terrible, waiting to unmake the world again. The washerwomen said she was blessed to work in the Citadel, protected by King Aldrich Stormcrown himself. Blessed, the word tasted like ash on her tongue. She couldn't speak. King Aldrich. Even his name carried weight like falling mountains. The Alpha King, who hadn't smiled in 3 years, whose heart had literally turned to stone after his mate's death. A curse so profound that the royal physicians could hear his chest produce the grinding sound of rock against rock instead of a heartbeat. They said he was more statue than man now, that his eyes held all the warmth of a winter grave, that he ruled with perfect justice simply because he felt nothing at all. Seraph had spent 7 years avoiding every royal function, every procession, every moment where the king's cold gaze might sweep the crowds, because the curse that stole her voice had left her with one terrible gift. She could hear heartbeats. Not just the rhythm, but their truth, fear, joy, rage, love, every emotion echoing out the percussion of blood through chambers. And she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that if she ever heard the sound of stone grinding where a heart should beat, something inside her would answer. The song would recognize a kindred curse, and her silence would shatter. This morning, as the first light painted the Citadel's obsidian towers gold, a bell tolled 3 times. The signal that made every servant freeze, every Omega's heart skip. The king was returning from the northern wastes. 3 weeks early, and for the first time in 7 years, Seraph felt the dam inside her chest begin to crack. The washing hall had become Seraph's entire world, and she'd made peace with that smallness. While other Omegas dreamed of alpha mates and pack bonds, she'd learned to find contentment in the rhythmic slap of wet fabric against stone, the sharp scent of lye soap, the simple mathematics of stains removed and linens folded. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency through the morning routine, sorting the palace laundry into careful piles. Royal household linens in one corner, guard uniforms in another, kitchen cloths by the door. She'd developed a reputation for being able to remove any stain, blood, wine, mud, even the black tar-like substance that resulted from curse residue. The head housekeeper, Madame Ravenna, called her invaluable. The other Omegas called her unnatural. Both were right. Silent One, called Lissa, a younger Omega with copper curls and a voice like honey. Did you hear? The king returns today with a prisoner. They say he captured the Void Witch herself. The other washerwomen gasped and chattered, but Seraph kept her head down, scrubbing at a particularly stubborn bloodstain. She'd learned that invisibility came not from hiding, but from being so consistently present that people forgot to actually see you. The irony of her position wasn't lost on her. 7 years ago, she'd been Seraphine Nightingale, daughter of the most celebrated opera singer in the 5 Kingdoms, blessed with a voice that could allegedly charm storms and soothe savage beasts. Her mother had called her gift divine. The traveling bard who'd visited their village had called it primordial magic, something from before the goddess established the Alpha-Omega hierarchy. Her father had simply called her his little songbird. Now she was just Seraph, truncated, diminished, safe. She'd forged papers claiming she was from the border villages, destroyed by rogues, family dead, voice lost to trauma. The story was common enough in these war-torn times that no one questioned it. She'd arrived at the Citadel's Omega Sanctuary 7 years ago, with nothing but the clothes on her back and eyes that still held the horror of what her voice had done. Madame Ravenna swept into the washing hall like a storm system, her iron-gray hair pulled back so severely it seemed to stretch her face. "Listen up, all of you. With the king's early return, we're short-staffed. I need 3 Omegas to serve at tonight's welcome feast." A collective groan rippled through the room. Serving meant being visible, being noticed, being exposed to the alpha nobles whose restraint varied wildly after a few cups of wine. "I'll need volunteers," Ravenna continued, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "The pay is double, and you'll have your pick of the kitchen leftovers." Hands shot up immediately. Seraph kept hers submerged in her washing basin, making herself smaller, invisible, safe. But Ravenna's gaze found her anyway, always did, pinning her like a butterfly to cork. "Silent one. You'll serve." Seraph's hands stilled in the water. She looked up, shaking her head firmly, pointing to her throat in the universal gesture she'd used 1,000 times. "I cannot speak. I cannot serve." Ravenna's expression softened marginally, but her voice remained steel. "You don't need to speak to pour wine and clear plates. Besides, the king specifically requested quiet, efficient service." "You're perfect," the king requested. Those 3 words made Seraph's pulse spike in a way 7 years of anonymity had taught her to suppress. Why would the king, who'd never noticed the servant class in his 3-year reign of stone-hearted indifference, suddenly care about the noise level of his servers? "It's decided," Ravenna declared. "Lissa, Marin, and Silent One. Report to the Great Hall at sunset, and for goddess's sake, wear something that doesn't smell like lye." As the other Omegas returned to their chattering and washing, Seraph stood frozen, water dripping from her raised hands. 7 years. 7 years of perfect invisibility, and now she'd be standing in the same room as the Alpha King whose heart beat like grinding stone. The dam inside her chest creaked ominously, and for the first time in years, she felt the song stir, curious, hungry, recognizing the approach of something that resonated with its terrible frequency. The Moonspire Citadel transformed as the day progressed, servants scurrying like ants before a storm. Seraph tried to focus on her washing, but the building tension infiltrated even her carefully maintained isolation. Through the high windows of the washing hall, she watched bannermen hang fresh standards from the parapets, their blue and silver fabric snapping in the wind like captured lightning. "They say he's different now," whispered Marin, an older Omega with scars crossing her left cheek. "After 3 years with that stone heart, he's become something else. Not cruel, but absent. Like looking at a mountain and expecting it to care about your problems." Lissa shuddered. "My cousin works in the royal wing. She says you can hear it at night when the palace is quiet, his heart grinding in his chest, stone against stone, the sound of something breaking over and over but never quite falling apart." Seraph's hands trembled in the wash water. The song stirred again, more insistent this time, pressing against her sealed throat like a fist. She'd learned to suppress it through meditation, through exhaustion, through the sheer daily grind of manual labor. But something about the approaching king made it restless, as if curse recognized curse across the distance. The morning crawled toward noon, and strange things began to happen, small things that others dismissed but made Seraph's stomach clench with recognition. A window pane cracked for no reason, the fractures spreading in patterns that looked almost like musical notation. Water in the washing basins rippled without wind or touch, creating interference patterns that hummed at a frequency just below hearing. And most disturbing, when Seraph breathed, tiny crystals of ice formed in the air before her lips, as if her breath itself was trying to become sound made visible. "Did you feel that?" Lissa asked suddenly, her hand pressed to her chest. Like a heartbeat that isn't mine?" Marin frowned. "Don't be dramatic. It's just the excitement of the king's return making you anxious." But Seraph had felt it too, a pulse that seemed to emanate from the citadel's core, slow and grinding, powerful as tectonic plates shifting. And worse, she felt the song respond, matching that rhythm, harmonizing with it in a way that made her teeth ache. By mid-afternoon, the head guard Captain Torvin appeared at the washing hall door, his weathered face grim. "Madam Ravenna, we have a situation. The prisoner the king is bringing the void witch she's been singing. Not words, just tones. And wherever she sings, reality cracks. We've had to gag her, but the sound comes anyway, like it's bypassing her mouth entirely." Seraph's blood turned to ice. Another singer, another cursed voice. And if they brought her into the citadel, if the two cursed voices resonated in the same space, Ravenna paled. Surely the king won't bring such a creature inside the walls? "He has no choice," Torvin replied grimly. "The only prison that can hold her is the nullification chamber, beneath the throne room. It's built from the same stone that comprises the king's heart, now dead stone, they call it. Absorbs all magic, all sound, all life." He paused. "We're reinforcing it now, but the king arrives at sunset, and the transfer must happen during the feast, while the nobles are distracted." After Torvin left, the washing hall erupted in nervous chatter, but Seraph stood silent, her mind racing. Deadstone. The material of the king's cursed heart. And a void witch whose voice could crack reality, all converging in one place, at one time, with her another cursed singer standing in the middle of it. She pressed her hand to her throat, feeling the seals that held the song captive. They felt thinner than usual, worn, as if 7 years of constant pressure had eroded them. As sunset approached and she changed into the simple gray serving dress Ravenna provided, Seraph caught her reflection in a polished water basin. Her eyes, normally a muted brown, held flecks of something else, crystalline structures that caught the light like fractured diamonds. Another sign that her curse was waking up. She touched the reflection, watching ripples destroy and reform her face. Tonight, she'd be in the same room as an alpha whose heart was literally stone, and a witch whose voice broke worlds. The song hummed in her sealed throat, eager, hungry, and for the first time in 7 years, Seraph wondered if silence had ever really been safety, or just a slower way to die. The great hall of Moonspire Citadel was a cathedral of shadows and silver light. Massive pillars carved from obsidian rose to a vaulted ceiling, where constellations had been inlaid in crushed diamonds, creating a night sky that never changed. Seraph stood in the servants' alcove, a silver pitcher of wine clutched in her shaking hands, watching the nobility filter in like gorgeous, dangerous predators in silk and jewels. Lissa stood beside her, fidgeting with her serving apron. "Remember, pour. From the right, never make eye contact with the alphas, and if anyone gets handsy, you have permission to spill wine on them accidentally, of course." She offered a nervous smile. "At least you don't have to make small talk." The attempt at humor fell flat. Seraph managed a weak smile, but her attention was fixed on the massive doors at the hall's far end, currently closed, behind which the king would soon appear. Marin appeared at her other side, carrying a tray of crystal glasses. "The prisoner's already been taken below," she whispered. "I saw them bringing her in through the servant passages." She was hooded and gagged, but goddess above, the sound. Even muffled, it made my bones ache. Seraph's grip on the pitcher tightened. She could feel it now, a resonance coming from deep beneath the citadel, like a tuning fork struck in the earth's core, calling to something inside her that desperately wanted to answer. The herald's voice rang out. "All rise for his majesty, King Aldrich, Stormcrown, first of his name, protector of the 5 kingdoms, bearer of the stone heart." The great doors swung open, and the temperature in the hall plummeted. Seraph felt it as a physical thing, not cold exactly, but absence. As if warmth simply ceased to exist in the space around him. Then he entered, and every instinct she'd honed over 7 years of survival screamed at her to run. King Aldrich Stormcrown was a monument built in human form. Easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of mountains, he moved with the terrible inevitability of a glacier. His hair was white gold. Not from age, he couldn't have been more than 30, but as if the color had been leached out by whatever curse had claimed his heart. His face was carved from the same aristocratic perfection as the citadel itself. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes the color of storm clouds, flat and depthless as painted stone. But it was the sound that made Seraph's carefully constructed silence crack. With each step he took, she heard it not with her ears, but with whatever cursed sense had awakened in her 7 years ago. His heartbeat, if it could be called that. A grinding, scraping rhythm like boulders rolling in an avalanche, slow and inexorable. Stone against stone, death and permanence, the sound of something that had forgotten how to be alive. The song surged against her sealed throat so violently she gasped, her hand flying to her neck. The pitcher in her other hand slipped, and only Lissa's quick reflexes prevented it from shattering on the marble floor. "Are you all right?" Lissa hissed, but Seraph couldn't respond, couldn't move, could barely breathe. Because the king had stopped mid-stride, his head turning with mechanical precision toward the servant's alcove. Toward her, those storm cloud eyes swept the alcove, passing over Lissa and Marin without pause. But when they found Seraph, they stopped. For 3 eternal heartbeats his grinding, hers thundering, neither moved. Something flickered in those dead eyes, so brief she might have imagined it. Not recognition exactly, but resonance. As if his curse had sensed hers across the crowded hall and lifted its head like a wolf scenting prey. "Your Majesty," Lord Cassius, the king's chief advisor, said smoothly, breaking the moment. "Your seat awaits." Aldrich blinked once, slowly, and whatever had flickered in his gaze vanished. He continued to the high table without another glance toward the alcove, moving with that same glacial inevitability. But Seraph's legs had turned to water. She leaned against the wall, her breath coming in short gasps, while the song raged inside her like a caged beast that had just caught sight of freedom. "By the goddess," Marin breathed. "Did the king just look at you?" "Don't be ridiculous," Lissa said, but her voice wavered. Kings don't see servants. Yet Seraph knew what she'd seen. More importantly, she knew what she'd heard. When their eyes met, for just a fraction of a second, his stone heart had changed rhythm. Not much, barely noticeable, but it had shifted from its grinding monotony to something else. A single note, clear and pure, like crystal singing in the depths of a cave. And in response, the seals on her throat had cracked. Not broken, not yet, but fractured. She could feel air moving against those cracks, the song testing them like water finding weak points in a dam. "Servers," Madame Ravenna's sharp voice cut through her panic. "To your stations, the feast begins." Seraph pushed off the wall and followed Lissa and Marin into the hall, her legs moving on autopilot while her mind screamed warnings. She'd been assigned to the high table. Of course she had. Because fate, it seemed, had a vicious sense of humor. As she took her position behind the king's chair, pitcher in hand, she could feel the dead stone of his heart pulling at her curse like gravity. And beneath the citadel, in the nullification chamber, the Void Witch's muffled song pulsed in rhythm with that pull. 3 cursed beings, 3 broken songs, all converging in the same space. Seraph closed her eyes and prayed to a goddess she'd stopped believing in 7 years ago. But when she opened them again, she found the king's reflection watching her in the polished surface of his wine cup. His lips didn't move, but she could have sworn she heard a voice stone grinding into words. "You're the one I've been hearing in my dreams." The feast progressed with the rigid formality of a funeral. Seraph moved through her duties like a ghost, pouring wine with trembling hands while hyper-aware of every shift in the king's stone-still posture. He sat at the center of the high table, flanked by Lord Cassius on his right, and Lady Yvain, the kingdom's high inquisitor, on his left. Both alphas of considerable power, both watching their king with the wary attention of people managing something dangerous. "Your Majesty," Lady Yvain said, her voice smooth as poisoned honey, "the capture of the Void Witch is a triumph, but I must express concerns. The creature's very presence pollutes the citadel. Already we've had reports of disturbances. She was beautiful in the way winter is beautiful, sharp edges and killing frost, with platinum hair and eyes like chips of ice. Her specialty was hunting rogue magic users, and she wore their deaths like medals." Aldrich's response came in that flat, effectless voice that matched his grinding heartbeat. "The nullification chamber will contain her." "Will it?" Yvain leaned forward, and Seraph, refilling her wine cup, caught the predatory gleam in her eyes. "Forgive my bluntness, sire, but you've grown distant from magical concerns since your curse. The Void Witch is unlike any prisoner we've held. Her power doesn't work like normal magic. It's primordial sound made manifest, reality manipulation through pure vibration." Seraph's hand jerked, wine splashing onto the white tablecloth. In the sudden silence, Every eye at the high table turned to her. "Clumsy Omega," Yvain said coldly. "Perhaps serving the high table requires more competence than washing linens." Seraph dropped into a deep bow, her face burning, but before she could retreat, a voice stopped her. "Leave it." The king's command, though spoken softly, carried the weight of falling mountains. Aldrich turned his head that slow, mechanical movement, and his storm-cloud eyes fixed on her again. "What's your name?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Seraph's mouth opened, closed. She pointed to her throat, shaking her head, performing the gesture that had protected her for 7 years. Lord Cassius interjected smoothly. "The Omega is mute, Your Majesty. Trauma from a rogue attack. The servants call her Silent One." "Silent," Aldrich repeated, and something in his tone made the word sound like a revelation rather than a description. How convenient. He didn't look away from her, and Seraph felt pinned, dissected, seen in a way that terrified her more than any rogue attack. "Tell me, Lord Cassius, what are the protocols for Omegas with unexplained trauma taking positions in the royal household?" Cassius shifted uncomfortably. "The Omega Sanctuary has its own screening process, sire. Anyone who passes through has been thoroughly vetted." "Vetted for what? Loyalty? Competence?" The king's grinding heartbeat seemed to grow louder, or perhaps Seraph was just more attuned to it, or simply for being broken enough not to pose a threat. Lady Yvain's eyes narrowed. "Your Majesty raises an interesting point. Perhaps the Silent One should submit to a truth binding. Simple procedure, merely a magical oath, that she means no harm to the crown." Panic spiked through Seraph's chest. Truth bindings required speech, required oaths spoken aloud. She shook her head violently, backing away from the table. "That won't be necessary," Aldrich said, his gaze still locked on Seraph. "If the Omega meant me harm, she's had ample opportunity. She stands close enough to poison my wine, slit my throat, or perform any number of lethal acts, yet she trembles like a frightened bird." He tilted his head, studying her. "Fear indicates no threat. Only secrets." A commotion at the hall's entrance interrupted the tense moment. Captain Torvin strode in, his face pale, flanked by 2 guards. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but there's been an incident in the nullification chamber." The hall fell silent. Aldrich rose with that glacial inevitability, and Seraph felt the temperature drop further. "Report." "The prisoner," Torvin said grimly. "She stopped singing. Completely. We thought it was the dead stone working, but—" He hesitated, glancing at the assembled nobles. "The chamber isn't silencing her, sire. She's listening, and the resonance patterns suggest she's found something she's trying to call." Yvain stood abruptly. "Impossible. The nullification chamber absorbs all magical frequency. There's nothing for her to hear, nothing to call. Unless," Aldrich said slowly, "there's another source of primordial sound within the citadel's walls." His eyes found Seraph again, and this time, there was no mistaking the sharp intelligence behind that stone facade. Another singer, one who's learned to be very, very quiet. Seraph's world tilted. She'd underestimated him. The stone heart might have robbed him of emotion, but it hadn't touched his mind. "Summon the chamber's resonance records," Aldrich commanded. "I want to see every frequency detected in the last 4 hours. Then, to Seraph specifically, you will accompany us, Silent One. Let's discover what the Void Witch is listening for." As guards moved to flank her, Seraph's carefully constructed world shattered. The song in her throat writhed against its seals, recognizing that it had been cornered. Below, she felt the Void Witch's awareness focus, sharp as a blade, piercing through stone and silence to find her. 2 cursed voices, about to meet, and between them, an alpha king, whose stone heart was starting to remember how to beat. The descent to the nullification chamber felt like walking into her own grave. Seraph was flanked by guards, their weapons drawn, but pointed away, not prisoners exactly, but certainly not free. Behind her, she could hear the grinding rhythm of the king's heartbeat, that stone-on-stone cadence that called to the song in her throat with magnetic insistence. The citadel's lower levels were older than the gleaming halls above, carved from raw mountain stone with ancient runes etched deep into the walls. Seraph recognized them pre-goddess script, from the time when magic wasn't divided into neat hierarchies but flowed wild and untamed. The same magic that had birthed the song inside her. "Careful," Lord Cassius warned as they descended. The deadstone concentration increases near the chamber. Those, sensitive to magic, will feel uncomfortable. Uncomfortable was an understatement. With each step, Sarah felt the seals on her throat constrict, tightening like a noose. The deadstone was trying to crush her curse, compress it, nullify it entirely. But the song didn't nullify easily. Instead, it compressed like a spring, building pressure, searching desperately for release. Her vision blurred. Her hands flew to her throat, clawing at invisible bindings. A hand caught her arm, steadying her. She looked up into storm cloud eyes that held something she hadn't seen before, not quite concern, but awareness. The deadstone affects you, Aldrich observed. Not a question, a conclusion. His grip on her arm was surprisingly gentle for someone whose heart was literal stone. You're not mute by choice, are you? You're mute by necessity. Before she could react, they reached the chamber's entrance. Massive doors of black deadstone stood open, and beyond them, Seraph could see the nullification chamber. A perfect sphere carved from the same stone as the king's heart, its walls inscribed with geometric patterns designed to absorb and disperse all magical frequencies. At the chamber's center, suspended by chains of pure iron, hung the Void Witch. She was younger than Seraph expected, perhaps mid-20s, with hair like starless night and skin so pale it seemed translucent. A gag covered her mouth, iron clips holding her jaw shut, but her eyes, goddess, her eyes burned with the light of collapsing stars. When those eyes found Seraph, they widened with recognition, then triumph. The Void Witch began to hum, not with her mouth, but with her entire being, the sound bypassing the gag entirely, resonating from somewhere deep in her chest. The chamber's deadstone walls should have absorbed it. Instead, they amplified it, the geometric patterns turning from suppressors into conductors. By the goddess, Lady Yvain breathed. She's weaponized the chamber itself. The frequency hit Seraph like a physical blow. The Void Witch wasn't calling to her, she was calling to the song, the primordial voice that all cursed singers shared. And the song, compressed by the deadstone, responded with violent enthusiasm. The seals on Seraph's throat shattered. She opened her mouth and screamed. Not in pain, not in fear, but in pure sonic force. 7 years of compressed, suppressed, denied voice erupting in a single harmonic that made reality fracture. The sound had colors, silver and black, swirling together like oil on water. It had texture, sharp as broken glass, smooth as silk, heavy as grief. And it had power, the kind that had killed everyone she loved 7 years ago. The chamber exploded. Not literally, but acoustically, the deadstone walls cracking in spiderwebs of light, each crack singing its own note, transforming the space into a cathedral of broken music. Guards screamed, clutching their ears as blood trickled between their fingers. Lord, Cassius fell to his knees. Lady Yvain's ice-chip eyes went wide with terror as her carefully maintained alpha shields shattered like glass. But King Aldrich didn't fall. He stood in the center of the sonic maelstrom, his white gold hair whipping in winds that weren't quite physical, his stone heart grinding out its slow rhythm. And impossibly, his heart was adapting, shifting its grinding cadence to match her frequency, resonating with it, creating a counter-harmony that shouldn't exist. Seraph tried to stop, tried to seal the song back into its prison, but 7 years of compression had given it momentum. It poured from her in waves, each one stripping away another layer of the reality around them. The guards' armor began to dissolve, their weapons turning to sand. The chamber walls aged centuries in seconds, ancient stone becoming powder. The Void Witch laughed, the sound joining Seraph's scream in terrible harmony. Together, their voices created something catastrophic, a resonance that cracked the foundation of the citadel itself. Enough, Aldrich commanded, but his voice was lost in the chaos. So he did the only thing that could stop her. He grabbed Seraph and kissed her. The contact was electric, impossible, world-altering. Where his lips touched hers, stone met song, and instead of destroying each other, they balanced. His curse and hers found equilibrium, her creative destruction meeting his destructive permanence, creating a moment of perfect stillness at the center of the storm. The song quieted, not silenced, but satisfied. As if it had found what it had been searching for all along. When Aldrich pulled back, his eyes had changed. They still held storms, but now those storms had lightning in them, alive, aware, feeling, and his voice, when he spoke, carried a new quality. Not quite warmth, but heat, like stone warmed by Sunday mine, he said. The alpha command, rippling through the word with primal certainty. This Omega is under my protection. Any who touch her answer to me. The declaration rang through the shattered chamber, witnessed by guards, by advisors, by a captive void witch, whose laughter had turned to sobs. Seraph stared at him, still reeling from the kiss, from the impossible balance they'd created, from the fact that her voice had emerged for the first time in 7 years and hadn't killed him. Lady Yvain rose shakily, her face twisted with rage and fear. Your Majesty, that creature just demonstrated the power that destroyed the Nightingale village 7 years ago. She's the Nightingale curse, the Omega, who killed 300 people with a single scream. She must be executed immediately. The pieces clicked into place. Seraph felt the blood drain from her face as 7 years of careful anonymity crumbled. Nightingale. Her mother's name, the name she'd buried along with her voice. Aldrich's hand tightened on her arm, pulling her behind him. She's under my protection, he repeated, his grinding heartbeat now, definitely carrying a new note. Not quite alive, but no longer entirely stone. And I'm claiming her. Formally. Before witnesses. The chamber fell silent, except for the settling dust and the void witch's muffled laughter. Aldrich had just done the one thing that could save Seraph from execution, but also the one thing that would bind them together irrevocably. In saving her life, he'd claimed her soul. The king's private chambers were located in the highest tower of Moonspire Citadel, a deliberate isolation from the court below. Seraph stood in the center of the cavernous room, her throat raw from 7 years of sealed silence suddenly broken, while Aldrich dismissed his guards with a gesture that brooked no argument. Leave us. Post sentries at the base of the tower. No one enters without my explicit command. When the door closed, sealing them in together, the silence felt like a living thing. Seraph's hands trembled at her sides. She wanted to speak, to explain, to apologize. But her voice, that terrible, beautiful, destructive thing, felt too dangerous to unleash again. Aldrich moved to a side table where crystal decanters caught the moonlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, his movements still carrying that glacial precision, but with something new underneath. Tension, maybe, or uncertainty. Drink, he commanded, offering her a glass. When she hesitated, his lips quirked in something that might have been trying to become a smile. It's not poisoned, although after what I witnessed in the chamber, I suspect poison would be the least effective weapon against you. Seraph took the glass with shaking hands and downed it in one burning gulp. The alcohol scorched her raw throat, but the pain was almost welcome proof that she still existed in the physical world and hadn't dissolved entirely into sound. Nightingale, Aldrich said, tasting the name. I remember the incident, 7 years ago, a rogue attack on a border village. Official reports claimed 300 dead, the village destroyed so completely that even the stones turned to powder. He circled her slowly, and she fought the urge to turn with him, to keep him in sight. What the reports didn't mention was that every victim died with ruptured eardrums, their bones shattered from the inside out by sonic force. The investigators found traces of a frequency they couldn't identify. Primordial magic, they concluded, from before the goddess established order. Seraph closed her eyes, the memories flooding back. Her mother's opera house, the traveling performers who'd come to their village, the rogue pack that had attacked during the evening performance, and her voice, unleashed in terror, becoming a weapon that made no distinction between friend and foe. They said a young Omega survived. Aldrich continued, now standing directly behind her. She could feel the cold emanating from him, the stone hearts, chill, traumatized into muteness. The investigators searched for her, but she'd vanished. Assumed dead in the chaos. Another victim of the rogues. His voice dropped lower, but she wasn't dead, she was running, hiding. Sealing away the very thing that made her dangerous, because she couldn't control it. A tear slid down Seraph's cheek. She nodded once, the admission breaking something inside her. Look at me, Aldrich commanded softly. When she turned, she found him closer than expected, storm cloud eyes now crackling with that new lightning. You spent 7 years in silence to protect others from yourself. You buried your name, your gift, your very identity to prevent what happened in Nightingale from happening again. His hand came up, hesitating just inches from her face. I understand that sacrifice better than you might think. Your curse, Seraph whispered, her voice rusty and strange to her own ears. The stone heart. The report said your mate died 3 years ago, and grief turned your heart to literal stone. Close, Aldrich said, and for the first time, she heard genuine emotion in his voice, bitter, dark, heavy as mountains, but not quite accurate. My mate didn't just die. She was murdered, poisoned by political rivals who thought a grieving king would be easier to manipulate. He turned away, moving to the windows overlooking the kingdom, spread below like a map of shadows and silver light. The pain of losing her should have destroyed me. As an alpha, as a king, as a man I should have gone feral, should have torn apart everyone I suspected, should have burned the kingdom down in rage. His hand pressed against his chest, over the grinding stone heart. Instead, I felt nothing. The curse manifested as protection, you see. My heart turned to stone not from grief, but to prevent grief, to stop me from feeling anything at all. Seraph moved to stand beside him, understanding dawning. You chose it, she breathed. The curse wasn't punishment. It was a shield. Yes. The word came out grinding, stone against stone. I couldn't trust myself with emotion, couldn't risk what I might do if I felt the full weight of her loss. So I asked the royal mages to bind my heart in dead stone, to make me invulnerable to feeling. He laughed, sharp and bitter. For 3 years, it worked perfectly. I became the ideal king, just, impartial, unmoved by passion or politics, a statue ruling a kingdom. But, Seraph prompted, sensing there was more. Aldrich turned to her, and his eyes held that lightning again, stronger now, barely contained. But then I started having dreams. For the past 6 months, every night, I'd dream of a voice, not words, just sound, pure and terrible and beautiful enough to make even stone weep. I'd wake with my heart grinding faster, as if trying to match a rhythm it could only hear in sleep. His hand came up, this time completing the gesture, his fingers trailing along her jaw with surprising gentleness. I was dreaming of you, of your sealed voice. The curse in my heart recognized the curse in your throat, and even turned to stone, it wanted to answer. The revelation hung between them like a bridge over an abyss. The void witch, Seraph said suddenly. She knew. That's why she stopped singing in the chamber. She was listening for me, for another cursed voice. Because primordial magic recognizes its own. Aldrich finished. The 3 of us, you, me, the Void Witch, were all touched by the old magic, the kind that existed before the goddess imposed order. And old magic calls to old magic. What does she want? Seraph asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Aldrich's expression darkened. The same thing all cursed beings want eventually. Freedom, revenge, or something worse, to find others like herself and wake the old magic entirely. To undo the goddess's order and return the world to primordial chaos. He stepped closer, and despite the cold radiating from his stone heart, Seraph felt heat building between them. When I kissed you in the chamber, I wasn't just stopping your scream, I was testing a theory. What theory? Her voice came out barely a whisper. That curses can balance each other. Your voice creates, destroys, reshapes reality through sound. My heart absorbs, nullifies, makes everything still and cold and dead. His hand moved from her jaw to rest over her throat, feeling the pulse of her voice beneath the skin. But together, for that moment, we found equilibrium. Your song didn't destroy me, and my stone didn't silence you. We created a space where both could exist without consuming the other. Seraph's breath caught. That's why you claimed me. Not to save me from execution, but because you're the only thing in 3 years that's made my heart remember it's supposed to beat? Aldrich interrupted. And because I suspect I'm the only anchor strong enough to keep your voice from destroying everything you love again. His thumb brushed across her throat, the gesture possessive and protective at once. We're bound now, Seraph Nightingale. My claim was witnessed. In the eyes of the kingdom, you're my omega, under my protection, my responsibility. And in your eyes? She asked, needing to hear it. In my eyes, he said slowly, as if the words were being dragged from stone. You're the first thing I've wanted, not needed, not required by duty, but genuinely wanted since my heart turned to stone. and that terrifies me more than any void witch or political rival ever could." Before she could respond, a sound shattered the moment, a scream, not of pain but of rage, resonating from deep beneath the citadel. The Void Witch, her muffled voice carrying a new message that seemed to bypass physical barriers entirely and imprint directly on their minds. "The balance is found. The triangle completes. 3 voices to wake the old song and end the goddess's tyranny forever." Aldrich and Seraph locked eyes, understanding crashing over them simultaneously. This wasn't about imprisonment or execution or even revenge. The Void Witch had orchestrated everything, allowing herself to be captured, being brought to the citadel where she could sense Seraph's sealed voice, using the Deadstone chamber to force that voice into the open. And now she had what she needed: knowledge of 3 cursed singers in one place. "She's going to try to free herself," Seraph said. "Worse," Aldrich corrected grimly. "She's going to try to free all of us. To merge our 3 curses into something the goddess's order can't contain." His stone heart ground faster, matching the accelerating rhythm of Seraph's pulse. "And if she succeeds, if our 3 voices join in the old song, reality itself will unmake." The nullification chamber exploded at midnight. Not with fire or force, but with sound, a frequency so low it couldn't be heard, only felt as the citadel's foundations cracked and the deadstone walls sang their dying song. Aldrich and Seraph felt it from the tower, a resonance that made her sealed throat burn and his stone heart grind violently against its eternal rhythm. They ran. Through corridors filled with screaming servants and confused guards, down spiral staircases where reality seemed to bend at strange angles, following the pull of the Void Witch's voice to its source. By the time they reached the lower levels, the destruction was obvious: walls aged to powder, iron gates twisted into impossible shapes, and guards lying unconscious with blood trickling from their ears. "She's not alone," Aldrich said grimly, his alpha senses picking up multiple heartbeats ahead. Someone freed her, someone who knew exactly how to bypass the Deadstone's nullification. They rounded the final corner to find the nullification chamber's doors torn open from the inside. In the corridor beyond stood the Void Witch, no longer chained, no longer gagged, her starless hair floating around her like she stood underwater. And beside her, to Seraph's horror, stood Lady Yvain. "Your Majesty," Yvain said with mock formality, her ice-chip eyes gleaming with triumph. "I'm afraid there's been a change in management." Aldrich's voice dropped to that grinding, stone against stone tone that promised violence. "Treason, High Inquisitor? I'm almost disappointed. I expected more creativity from you." Yvain laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Treason implies betrayal of a rightful ruler. But tell me, Your Majesty, is a king with no heart truly a king, or just a very well-dressed monument?" The Void Witch stepped forward, and Seraph finally heard her true voice, not the muffled hum from before, but full and terrible, like wind through a canyon of bones. "The false king and the silent murderer. How poetic that you found each other," her eyes fixed on Seraph with predatory intensity. "Tell me, sister, do you know what we are? What we really are?" "We're cursed," Seraph said, her voice steady, despite her terror. "Touched by primordial magic that we can't control." "Cursed," the Void Witch repeated, tasting the word like poison. "Is that what you tell yourself? That we're victims of some cosmic accident?" She spread her arms, and the corridor around them responded, walls rippling like water, reality becoming fluid under her voice's influence. "We're not cursed, Seraph Nightingale, we're the goddess's mistake. The ones who remember what magic was before she imposed her order, before alphas ruled, before omegas submitted, before the world was divided into neat hierarchies." Aldrich moved to stand in front of Seraph, his body a shield between her and the Void Witch. "Your philosophy is fascinating, but it doesn't explain why you're working with my High Inquisitor." "Simple," Yvain interjected. "The Void Witch offered me something I've wanted for years, proof that the goddess's order is failing. These past decades, more and more children are born with wild magic, untamed abilities that don't fit into alpha, beta, omega categories. Your own stone heart, Your Majesty, is proof of this. And our silent nightingale here, an omega who wields power that should belong to an alpha? The system is breaking down. So you want to accelerate its collapse," Aldrich concluded. "To what end? Chaos? Anarchy?" "Evolution," the Void Witch corrected. "The old magic is waking up, drawn by those of us who carry it. In another generation, maybe 2, the goddess's rigid order will shatter entirely. But I can speed that process. I can wake the old song now, tonight, if I have what I need. Her gaze locked on Seraph with hungry intensity. I need 3 voices, 3 cursed singers, to harmonize the frequency that will dissolve the goddess's bindings entirely. You have yourself and Seraph, Aldrich said carefully. What's the 3rd voice? The Void Witch smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Seraph had ever seen. You, Stone King, did you really think your grinding heart was just a curse? It's a voice to percussion, the drumbeat underlying all reality, sound made solid, the bass note that everything else harmonizes against. She took a step forward, and the temperature dropped further. Your stone heart, my chaos voice, and the nightingale's creative destruction. Together, we'll sing reality into a new shape. I refuse, Aldrich said flatly. Then you'll die, Yvain replied, pulling a blade from her robes, not steel, but crystallized deadstone, the same material as the king's heart. If we can't have your voice, we'll take your heart. The deadstone itself will serve as the 3rd note. She lunged with alpha speed, but Aldrich was faster. His curse might have robbed him of emotion, but it had left his predator instincts intact. He caught Yvain's wrist mid-strike, and the deadstone blade pressed against his chest, directly over his stone heart. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the blade began to resonate, vibrating in harmony with his grinding heartbeat, and Aldrich's face twisted in something that might have been pain if his curse allowed such feeling. Yes, the Void Witch breathed, her voice picking up the resonance, amplifying it. The heart remembers what it was. It wants to feel again. Let me help you, Stone King. Let me wake your frozen emotions and free you from this prison. The offer was temptation wrapped in truth. Seraph could see it in Aldrich's eyes, the part of him that desperately wanted to feel again, to remember what love and grief and joy tasted like. 3 years of perfect numbness, warring against the basic human need for connection. Don't listen to her, Seraph said, moving to his side. The curse protects you. Without it, I'd be vulnerable. Aldrich finished. I'd feel everything. The grief for my lost mate, the rage at her murderers, the fear of ruling a kingdom I no longer understand. His eyes met Seraph's, and she saw the piercent, lightning in them flickering, uncertain. But I'd also feel whatever this is between us. This pull, this balance. For 3 years I've been half alive, and you're the first thing that's made me want to be whole again. The Void Witch's voice rose, finding the resonance frequency of his stone heart and amplifying it. Join us, Stone King. The 3 of us together can remake the world. No more rigid hierarchies, no more omegas enslaved by biology, no more alphas bound by duty. Just pure, free magic, wild and untamed as it was meant to be. The deadstone blade in Yvain's hand began to glow, and Aldrich's stone heart responded, cracks appearing in his chest like black lightning. Aldrich, Seraph said urgently, feeling her own voice responding to the Void Witch's song, the seals on her throat weakening again. If you break your curse, the grief will destroy you. You said it yourself, you couldn't trust yourself with emotion. I know, he said quietly, then, louder. But I'm tired of being stone. I want to feel again, even if it kills me. The admission hung in the air like a confession. No. Seraph grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. Not like this, not by joining her. If you're going to break your curse, you'll do it by choice, not because she forced you. How touching, the Void Witch mocked. The nightingale, who killed 300 people in a single scream, thinks she can offer salvation. Tell me, sister, how many more will die when your voice breaks free again? How many will you destroy while trying to save your Stone King? The words hit like physical blows. Because she was right. Seraph's voice was a weapon she couldn't fully control. Every time it emerged, people died. Reality shattered. Everything she touched turned to destruction. Unless. The thought struck her like lightning. In the chamber below, when Aldrich had kissed her, her voice hadn't destroyed him. Because his stone heart absorbed the destructive force, turned it into something else. Balance. Equilibrium. The Void Witch is wrong, Seraph said suddenly, her voice gaining strength. She needs 3 separate voices to sing the old song. But what if we don't give her 3? What if we give her 2 that act as one? Aldrich understood immediately. Our curses balance each other, your creation against my destruction. If we harmonize, We create something she can't control. Sarah finished. Not the old song of chaos, but a new song, order and wildness together. The Void Witch's expression flickered from triumph to uncertainty. That's impossible. Cursed magic can't be controlled, can't be shaped. It either consumes or is consumed. Wrong, Aldrich said, and his stone heart ground out a new rhythm, not the slow, grinding death march, but something faster, harder, more alive. You're right that the goddess's order is breaking down, but you're wrong about what comes next. It's not chaos or rigid hierarchy, it's balance, and we're going to show you. He pulled Seraph close, his stone-cold body against her trembling warmth. And together they began to sing. Not with words, not with melody, but with the pure frequencies of their curses intertwining. His grinding stone percussion against her crystalline destruction, creating harmonics that the Void Witch's chaos voice couldn't match. The corridor around them responded, but instead of dissolving into chaos, it transformed stone becoming more solid, air becoming clearer, reality asserting itself with renewed strength. And in the center of it all, Aldrich's stone heart began to crack. Not breaking, but opening. Like a geode revealing crystals within. For the first time in 3 years, King Aldrich Stormcrown felt, and the first thing he felt was love for the Omega singing destruction into his arms. The new song grew in power and complexity, Seraph's voice weaving through Aldrich's stone heart rhythm like silver thread through granite. But the Void Witch wasn't defeated yet. She'd spent too many years perfecting her chaos magic to surrender to balance so easily. Her voice rose in response, not trying to match their harmony, but to drown it, to overwhelm their careful equilibrium with pure sonic violence. If I can't have the Stone King's heart willingly, she snarled, I'll shatter it and take the pieces. Her voice hit a frequency that made reality scream, and the dead stone blade in Yvain's hand flew from the High Inquisitor's grip, embedding itself directly in Aldrich's chest. The impact should have killed him instantly. Dead stone against his stone heart, like striking flint against steel, generating not sparks, but annihilation. Aldrich gasped, his stone heart grinding violently, and Sarah felt their song falter as his rhythm became erratic, chaotic. No, Seraph breathed, catching him as he stumbled. The blade protruded from his chest like an accusation, and around it, his heart, that beautiful, terrible stone prison was shattering. Not opening gently like a geode, but breaking, splintering, destroying itself and him with it. You're dying, she whispered, horror flooding through her. Not yet. Aldrich ground out through clenched teeth. But soon. The curse is breaking too fast. All the emotions I've suppressed for 3 years are flooding back at once. It's too much. His eyes met hers, and she saw everything in them now, not just the lightning, but the storm entire. Grief for his lost mate, rage at his betrayers, fear of inadequacy. And underneath it all, love for her, so intense it burned like fever. I can't hold it all, he confessed. The stone held it back, dampened it, made it bearable. Without it, I'm drowning in feeling. The Void Witch laughed, her chaos voice building to a crescendo. Perfect. The Stone King breaks, the nightingale watches helplessly, and I get what I need anyway. Your shattered heart will sing the third note of the old song beautifully. Yvain stepped forward, her expression calculating. Take the pieces, my lady. Use them to complete the ritual. But Seraph wasn't listening to either of them. She was staring at Aldrich, at his grinding, breaking heart, at the curse that had protected and imprisoned him for 3 years, and she understood what had to be done. The curse protected you by turning your heart to stone, she said slowly. Making you feel nothing. But what if there's another way to protect you? Another prison that could hold the emotions without destroying them? What are you suggesting? Aldrich asked, though his eyes said he already knew. My voice, Seraph said. My curse creates destruction, but that's because I've never had a container strong enough to hold it. Your stone heart absorbed my song in the chamber. What if I could return the favor? What if I could take your emotions into my voice and hold them, carry them, let them resonate inside me instead of destroying you? That would kill you, Aldrich said flatly. Your curse is already barely contained. Adding my emotional overload would shatter your seals entirely. You destroy everything within miles, including yourself. Maybe, Seraph agreed. Or maybe our curses would balance again, your emotions giving my voice purpose, my voice giving your emotions form. Instead of both being prisons, we'd be complementary. Two halves of one song. The Void Witch's laughter cut off abruptly. You can't be serious. That's insane. Curse magic doesn't work that way. You can't just share it like an alpha and omega sharing a bond? Seraph interrupted. Like mates balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses? Like two people choosing to carry each other's burdens? She turned back to Aldrich, her voice steady despite her terror. You claimed me before witnesses. You said I was yours. Let me claim you back. Let me be your heart's keeper if you'll be my voice's anchor. Aldrich stared at her, his cracking stone heart grinding so fast it sounded almost like a real heartbeat. You barely know me. We've spent less than a day together. I know you're the first person in 7 years I've spoken to without fear, Seraph replied. I know your curse recognized mine before we ever met. I know that when we harmonize, the world makes sense in a way it hasn't since I destroyed my village. She placed her hand over his shattered heart, feeling the sharp edges of breaking stone. And I know that I'm willing to risk everything to save you. Isn't that what mates do? The word mates hung between them like a vow. Aldrich's hand covered hers, pressing it harder against his breaking heart. If we do this, there's no going back. You'll carry my grief, my rage, my love. Every emotion I've suppressed will become part of your song. You'll never be silent again. Good, Seraph said. I'm tired of silence, tired of running, tired of hiding what I am. She looked up at him, her eyes blazing with determination. I spent 7 years being afraid of my voice. Maybe it's time I learned to use it. And what better first use than saving the man whose stone heart taught mine to sing again? This is madness, Yvain hissed. You'll both die. The magical feedback alone is worth the risk. Aldrich interrupted. Then to Seraph. Do it. Take my heart's burden. Let's see if curse magic can learn to love. Seraph closed her eyes and opened her mouth, and her voice emerged not in a scream this time, but in a song. A real song, with melody and harmony and purpose. She sang of stone hearts and sealed voices, of curses that were prisons and prisons that were mercy. And as she sang, she reached into Aldrich through their joined hands and began pulling his emotions into her voice. It was agony and ecstasy combined. 3 years of suppressed grief hit her like a tidal wave his dead mate's face, her last words, the empty space she'd left in his bed and his life. Then came the rage hot and sharp as the blade that had poisoned her, directed at faceless enemies, and his own helplessness. Fear followed, cold and suffocating fear of failing his kingdom, of becoming his father, of never feeling whole again. And finally, threading through it all, love, not just for his lost mate, but for his kingdom, his people, his duty, and impossibly, for her Seraph, the silent nightingale who'd made his stone heart remember how to beat. She took it all, wrapped each emotion in her voice, gave it form and frequency and purpose. The song in her throat, which had only ever known how to destroy, learned something new, how to hold, how to preserve, how to transform pain into music and music into meaning. Aldrich's stone heart stopped breaking. The cracks remained, but they no longer spread. Instead, they began to glow with the same crystalline light that had flickered in Seraph's throat, his curse and hers merging at a fundamental level. Impossible, the Void Witch breathed, her chaos voice faltering as she witnessed something she'd never imagined, 2 curses, choosing to become one. You can't do this. Curse magic is individual, solitary. It doesn't share, doesn't merge, doesn't love. Seraph finished, her song still pouring from her lips, still pulling Aldrich's emotions into safe harbor. Your curse doesn't love. Mine couldn't. His wouldn't. But together, we're learning. The Void Witch screamed, her chaos voice erupting in desperate fury. She threw everything she had at them, frequencies designed to shatter stone, to burst organs, to dissolve the bonds between atoms. The corridor around them began to disintegrate, reality itself turning fluid under her assault. But Seraph and Aldrich stood firm, their harmonized curses creating a sphere of balanced reality that her chaos couldn't penetrate. Join us, Seraph said, still singing, her voice now carrying both her creative destruction and Aldrich's stone, solid stability. Your curse doesn't have to be chaos. It could be freedom, wild magic finding form through choice rather than force. For a moment, just a heartbeat, the Void Witch's expression flickered. Something almost like hope crossed her features. But then Yvain grabbed her arm, hissing urgently, "Don't listen to them. They're trying to trap you the same way the goddess trapped your ancestors. Order disguised as choice, chains disguised as love." The moment passed. The Void Witch's face hardened, and her voice rose in a final, desperate attack, a frequency so destructive, it began unmaking, not just the corridor, but the foundation of the citadel itself, the mountain it stood upon, the bedrock beneath. "If I can't have freedom through the old song," she shrieked, "then no one gets anything. I'll unmake it all, starting here, spreading outward until the goddess's entire ordered world dissolves into primordial chaos." Seraph felt Aldrich's hand tighten on hers, felt his stone heart now permanently cracked, forever changed, but no longer breaking grind out a steady, strong rhythm. "Together?" he asked. "Together," she confirmed. And they sang the new song, not to attack or defend, but simply to be, to exist as themselves, fully and completely, curse and blessing and everything between. The sound that emerged wasn't destruction or nullification, but transformation. It touched the Void Witch's chaos, and didn't fight it, didn't suppress it, but simply showed it another option. What if chaos could choose to create instead of destroy? The Void Witch's chaos voice met the new song like storm against mountain. For 3 heartbeats, the conflict hung in balance, pure destruction against balanced transformation. The citadel groaned, reality fractured, and every living being within the kingdom felt the moment stretch thin as spun glass. Then something impossible happened. The Void Witch's chaos didn't shatter against their harmony. It wove through it, between it, finding spaces where wild magic could exist within structure, where freedom could dance inside form. Her voice changed. Not surrendering, not submitting, but adapting. The chaos found patterns, mathematics, crystalline structures that amplified rather than constrained. And in that moment of transformation, Seraph understood what the Void Witch had always been seeking. Not the destruction of order, but proof that wild magic could exist without being tamed or trapped. The Void Witch screamed, but this time, not in rage and revelation. Her body, which had always seemed translucent and unstable, began to solidify, not into flesh exactly, but into something between matter and energy, form and freedom. The starless darkness of her hair caught light, turning it into prismatic cascades. Her eyes, which had burned with the light of collapsing stars, softened into something almost human. "What have you done?" she gasped, her voice no longer carrying that reality-breaking frequency. It was still powerful, still inhuman, but tempered now, controlled by choice rather than imposed suppression. "We showed you a third option," Aldrich said, his cracked stone heart still grinding, but now with a rhythm that sounded almost musical. Not the goddess's rigid order, not primordial chaos, but balance, wild magic that chooses its own structure. Lady Yvain stared in horror at her transformed ally. "No. This isn't what we planned. You were supposed to break reality, not this." She lunged for the dead stone blade still embedded in Aldrich's chest, perhaps thinking she could finish what the Void Witch had started. But the transformed singer's hand shot out, catching Yvain's wrist with newfound solidity. "Enough," the Void Witch said, and her voice carried a new quality authority born not from destruction, but from understanding. "I sought chaos because I thought order was my enemy, but they're not enemies, they're dance partners, and I've been too afraid to learn the steps." She pulled the dead stone blade from Aldrich's chest in one smooth motion. The king didn't fall, didn't scream, because the wound beneath wasn't bleeding, it was glowing, the cracks in his stone heart now filled with crystalline light that pulsed in rhythm with Seraph's voice. "Your curse saved you," the Void Witch observed, studying Aldrich with new eyes, "and hers completed you, 2 half-prisons becoming 1 freedom." She turned the dead stone blade in her hand, and it began to transform, the oppressive nullification giving way to something new stone that absorbed magic, not to destroy it, but to reflect it, amplify it, give it focus. "I have been known as the Void Witch for so long I'd forgotten my true name," she said softly. "I was Nyx once, before my village burned, before my chaos voice awakened and killed everyone I loved. Her eyes met Seraph's with sudden understanding. We're the same, you and I. Nightingales who sang destruction until we learned to sing something else. The difference, Seraph said gently, still singing softly to maintain Aldrich's stabilization, is that I found someone to harmonize with before the isolation drove me to madness. You could have too, if you'd looked for balance, instead of revenge. Nyx's expression twisted with something that might have been regret. Perhaps, but I spent too many years alone, too many nights listening to the chaos in my voice with no one to answer it. She looked down at Yvain, who struggled futilely in her grip. I let this one manipulate me, use me, because she promised me companionship and revolution. I should have recognized another predator hiding behind political philosophy. What do we do with her? Aldrich asked, his voice carrying new warmth despite the stones still comprising his heart. She betrayed her position, freed a dangerous prisoner, and attempted regicide. Before anyone could answer, the citadel shuddered. The damage from the three-way sonic battle had weakened its foundations catastrophically. Ancient stone that had stood for millennia began to fail, massive cracks spreading through walls and floors. We need to stabilize it, Seraph said urgently, or the entire structure will collapse. Thousands of people, servants, guards, nobles, they're all still inside. I can nullify the damage, Aldrich said, his stone hearts grinding, taking on new purpose. The dead stone in my curse can absorb the failing structure, prevent the collapse. But that would mean spreading your curse through the entire citadel, Seraph protested. You'd turn the whole building to stone, trap yourself in its foundations. Not if we do it together. Nyx interjected. Your voice creates, his absorbs, mine. She looked at her transformed hands, at the chaos-turned choice that now defined her. Mine can be the catalyst. I can spread your combined frequency through every crack, every weakness, transforming failure into foundation. Why would you help us? Aldrich demanded. After everything. Because, Nyx interrupted. I'm tired of destroying. Tired of running. Tired of being the monster in everyone's nightmares, including my own. She met Seraph's eyes. You showed me that curses can choose what they become. Let me choose to be someone who saves, instead of shatters. Just this once. There was no time for debate. The citadel groaned like a dying beast, and somewhere above, people screamed as floors gave way. Seraph looked at Aldrich, saw the determination in his storm-cloud eyes still cracked with lightning but no longer dead, no longer just stone. Together, she said, echoing the promise that had saved them before. Always, he replied. They linked hands, Seraph, Aldrich, and Nyx, forming a triangle not of destruction, but of transformation, and together, they sang. Seraph's voice provided the creative force, weaving reality like thread. Aldrich's stone heart gave the structure, his curse spreading through the failing citadel not as oppression but as reinforcement. And Nyx's chaos become choice, served as the binding agent, the wild magic that made dead stone into living architecture. The transformation rippled outward from where they stood. Cracks didn't just seal, they became stronger than before, filled with crystalline structures that resonated with the new song. Failing foundations didn't just stabilize, they grew roots, real or metaphorical, anchoring the citadel deeper into the mountain. And throughout it all, the three voices harmonized, teaching the ancient building that it didn't have to choose between standing rigid or falling apart. It could flex, adapt, change while remaining essentially itself. When the song finally ended, the Moonspire Citadel stood transformed. Its black stone walls now held veins of crystal that glowed softly in the moonlight. Its foundations had merged with the mountain itself, indistinguishable from natural stone. And at its heart, powering it all, sat Aldrich's stone curse, spread thin through every wall and floor, but no longer imprisoning now, sustaining, supporting, giving strength through chosen sacrifice. Aldrich collapsed, and Seraph caught him, both of them falling to their knees. His stone heart no longer ground like dying machinery. Instead, it beat slowly, heavily, but with clear purpose. Part stone still, yes, but also part flesh, part crystal, part something entirely new. Is it over? He asked, his voice rough. Almost, Seraph replied, looking up at Nyx. What will you do now? Your curse is transformed, but you're still dangerous, still powerful. Nyx looked at her hands, at the chaos-turned choice that now defined her existence. I'll leave. Find others like us, curse singers, wild magic users, those who don't fit the goddess's neat categories. But instead of teaching them to destroy, I'll teach them what you taught me, that curses can choose. She smiled, and it transformed her face from alien to almost human. Maybe I'll start a school, the Academy of Balanced Chaos. Has a nice ring to it. And her? Seraph nodded toward Yvain, who stood frozen in shock, her carefully laid plans shattered as thoroughly as Aldrich's stone heart had been. She'll face justice, Aldrich said, struggling to his feet with Seraph's help. Traditional justice, through the kingdom's courts. Let the nobles who supported her see what treason costs. His cracked eyes held no mercy. But she'll live. Unlike the mate she helped poison 3 years ago, she'll have the opportunity to spend decades regretting her choices. As guards finally arrived, drawn by the cessation of sonic battle rather than its presence, Seraph and Aldrich stood together, their hands still linked, their curses permanently intertwined. They'd saved the Citadel, transformed a chaos witch into an unlikely ally, and created something the goddess's ordered world had never seen before, a curse that chose to be a blessing. But more importantly, they'd found each other. A silent Omega who learned to sing again, and a stone-hearted king who remembered how to feel. Together, they were neither curse nor blessing, neither alpha nor omega, but simply balanced. Dawn broke over the transformed Moonspire citadel, painting its new crystalline veins gold and rose. Seraph stood on the balcony of Aldrich's tower chamber, watching the kingdom wake to a world that had fundamentally changed overnight. Below, crowds gathered, nobles, merchants, servants, guards, all staring up at walls that now glowed softly with captured starlight, all whispering about the miracle and the curse that had saved them. "They're afraid," Aldrich said, coming to stand beside her. His voice still carried that gravelly quality, stone grinding against flesh, but warmer now. More alive. Not of the Citadel, of us, of what we represent. Seraph nodded, her hand instinctively moving to her throat where the seals had once held her voice captive. She could feel it now, not imprisoned, but present, waiting. A tool she could choose to wield rather than a weapon she feared. Change is always frightening. Especially when it involves magic that doesn't fit into established categories. A knock at the door interrupted them. At Aldrich's command, Captain Torvin entered, his weathered face troubled. "Your Majesty, the Noble Council demands an emergency session. They want explanations. About last night, about the Void Witch, about..." He hesitated, glancing at Seraph. "About the Omega who sang the Citadel into standing." "Let them demand," Aldrich said flatly. "Convene the full court at noon. Public session, open to all. If we're going to explain, the entire kingdom deserves to hear it, not just the nobles who think their blood buys them exclusive truth." By noon, the Great Hall, miraculously undamaged, despite the previous night's chaos, was packed beyond capacity. Nobles in their silk and jewels occupied the front rows, but behind them pressed merchants, craftspeople, and even servants, all demanding to understand what had happened. Seraph stood beside Aldrich's throne, not behind it as Omega. Protocol dictated, but as an equal, their hands openly linked. The statement was deliberate, provocative, revolutionary. Lord Cassius called the session to order, his voice strained. "Your Majesty, members of the court, citizens of the 5 kingdoms. We gather to address the events of last night, which have left many with questions and concerns." He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should begin with the escaped prisoner and the charges against the former High Inquisitor Yvain?" "No," Aldrich interrupted, his stone heart grinding audibly in the sudden silence. "We begin with the truth about what I am, about what happened 3 years ago when grief turned my heart to stone." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nobles who'd carefully pretended not to notice their king's curse suddenly found it impossible to ignore. "My mate was murdered," Aldrich continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Poisoned by political rivals who thought a grieving king would be easier to control. And they were right to fear my grief. As an alpha descended from the old bloodlines, the rage should have driven me feral. Should have made me destroy everything and everyone connected to her death." He pressed his hand to his chest, over the cracked stone heart that pulsed with crystalline light. "So I chose to feel nothing. I asked the royal mages to bind my heart in dead stone, to make me invulnerable to emotion. For 3 years, it worked. I became the just, impartial king you all praised. I also became half dead. His eyes swept the assembled nobles. Until last night, when a silent Omega made my stone heart remember how to beat. Seraph stepped forward, her voice clear and strong the first time most of the court had heard her speak. I am Seraphine Nightingale, daughter of the opera singer who died 7 years ago when rogues attacked her village. I am also the curse that destroyed that village, 300 dead in a single scream because I couldn't control the primordial magic that awakened in my voice. The hall erupted in chaos, accusations, fear, demands for her execution. But Aldrich raised his hand, and something in his posture alpha command mixed with the stone authority of his curse brought instant silence. She sealed her voice for 7 years, he said. Gave up her identity, her family name, her very ability to speak, to protect all of you from the weapon she couldn't control. She scrubbed floors, washed linens, made herself invisible because she feared what she was. His cracked eyes found hers, holding pride and pain in equal measure. And then I forced her to serve at my table. Forced her into proximity with my stone heart, which resonated with her sealed voice. We activated each other's curses without intending to. A noble stood Lord Garrett, looking considerably more sober than he'd been at the feast. You're saying the king is cursed and his Omega is a mass murderer? How is this reassuring? Because, came a new voice from the hall's entrance. Curses can choose what they become. Nyx walked in, no longer the terrifying Void Witch, but something gentler, though no less powerful. Her chaos voice had settled into a frequency that made reality shimmer around her without breaking it. I spent years believing my curse defined me, that because I was touched by primordial magic, I had no choice but to destroy. She moved through the crowd, which parted before her like water. I was wrong. Last night, these two showed me that curses can balance each other. That wild magic and ordered structure don't have to be enemies. That primordial power can choose to create instead of destroy. She stopped before the throne, and to everyone's shock, she knelt not in submission, but in respect. I came here planning to tear down the goddess's order, to wake the old song, and return the world to chaos. Instead, I learned that chaos and order are dance partners, and I've been too stubborn to learn the steps. Lady Morgana, one of the most conservative nobles, stood with obvious agitation. This is heresy. The goddess established the Alpha-Omega hierarchy for our protection. You speak of primordial magic as if it's not dangerous, not destructive. It is dangerous, Seraph interrupted. So is fire. So is the sea. So is any force of nature powerful enough to transform the world. But we don't eliminate fire, we learn to control it, to use it for warmth and cooking and forging. We don't empty the sea, we learn to sail it, to fish it, to work with its tides rather than against them. She stepped down from the dais, moving into the crowd, letting them see her fully. The goddess's order served its purpose. It gave structure to a chaotic world, created stability in place of constant warfare. But the world is changing. More children are born with wild magic, with abilities that don't fit into Alpha, Beta, Omega categories. You can kill them, suppress them, fear them. Her voice rose, carrying harmonics that made the crystalline veins in the walls sing softly. Or you can learn from them. Learn that magic doesn't have to be tamed or caged to be safe. It just needs balance. An Omega from the back of the hall, barely more than a child, raised her hand tentatively. What happens to us, the Omegas who aren't cursed, who don't have wild magic? In your new balance, what place do we have? Seraph's expression softened. The same place you've always deserved. To be valued for more than biology, to have choices about your own lives, to be seen as complete people rather than breeding stock or convenient victims. She looked back at Aldrich. The Alpha-Omega bond doesn't have to be about dominance and submission. It can be about balance, strength, supporting strength, not power-crushing weakness. And the king? Lord Cassius asked carefully. Your Majesty, your curse is now bound to this Omega, permanently. Your heart beats in rhythm with her voice. If something happens to her, then something happens to me. Aldrich finished simply. Yes, we're bound. Yes, it's permanent. Yes, it's dangerous. His cracked eyes held challenge. It's also the only reason the citadel is still standing. The only reason the Void Witch chose transformation over destruction. The only reason I'm capable of feeling anything at all. He stood, and the grinding of his stone heart resonated through the hall's transformed walls, creating a bass note that everything else harmonized against. I'm not asking permission, I'm informing you of reality. The world is changing whether you accept it or not. Wild magic is waking up, curses are learning to balance, and the rigid hierarchies you depend on are becoming fluid. You can fight this change and break against it, or you can adapt. And if we don't? Lady Morgana demanded. If we refuse to accept this blasphemy against the goddess's order? Aldrich smiled, and it was sharp as breaking stone. Then you're welcome to leave my kingdom and find one that better suits your convictions. I hear the northern wastes are lovely this time of year, very traditional, also very frozen and inhospitable, but one can't have everything. The threat was clear, adapt or leave. And as Seraph looked out over the assembled court, she saw the moment it crystallized, some faces hardening with rejection, but more softening with curiosity, with hope, with the tentative acceptance of people who'd been suffering under rigid structures, and suddenly saw the possibility of freedom. The Order of the Stone Heart and the Singing Voice, Nyx said suddenly, her chaos become choice voice-painting possibilities in the air. That's what we'll call it. A new organization to help others like us, those touched by wild magic, those whose curses need balance rather than suppression. We'll teach harmony instead of hierarchy. We? Seraph asked, surprised. Nyx smiled. Did you think I'd let you have all the fun? I said I'd teach others what you taught me. Besides, you'll need help. There are more cursed singers out there than you realize. More old magic waking up. More primordial power finding its way into new generations. She looked at Aldrich. And you'll need someone to help manage the Stone King when his heart gets too rigid. Balance requires at least 3 points of contact: creation, destruction, and the chaos between that makes choice possible. The session continued for hours, working through practical details, legal frameworks, consequences for Yvain, and the establishment of Nyx's Academy of Balanced Chaos as a sanctioned institution under royal protection. By sunset, when the court finally dispersed, a new order had been established, not replacing the goddess's hierarchy, but evolving it, making space for wild magic to exist within structure. As nobles filed out, some angry, some thoughtful, all changed, a young Omega approached Seraph hesitantly. She had silver flecks in her eyes, the sign of awakening magic. My lady, she whispered. My voice. Sometimes when I sing, shadows dance. My family thinks I'm cursed, that I should be silent like you were. But now I don't know what to do. Seraph knelt to the child's level, seeing her own terror and confusion reflected back. What's your name? Lyric, the girl said softly. My mother was a musician. Then you're not cursed, Lyric. You're blessed. Your voice is learning to paint with sound, to give shadows form. Seraph took the child's hands. Come to the Citadel tomorrow. I'll teach you what I've learned, that voices like ours aren't weapons to be feared. They're instruments to be played. And the first step is learning that silence is a choice, not a prison. As the girl left with her mother, who looked torn between fear and hope, Aldrich pulled Seraph close. His stone heart ground against her ribs, but warmly now, a rhythm that matched her pulse. You realize what you've done? He murmured. Started a revolution? Bigger, he said. You've given them hope, shown them that being different doesn't mean being broken. That's more dangerous to the old order than any chaos magic. Seraph leaned into him, feeling the balance between his stone and her song, feeling the rightness of it. Good. Let it be dangerous. Let it transform everything. The world needs to learn that curses are just blessings that haven't found their purpose yet. Together, they stood in the transformed Great Hall, surrounded by walls that pulsed with crystalline light, grounded in stone that had chosen to be foundation instead of prison. Two cursed beings who'd found each other in the darkness and created something the goddess's ordered world had never imagined. A love that balanced destruction and creation, a bond that made strength from what others called weakness. The age of rigid hierarchies was ending. The age of balanced chaos was just beginning. And at its center stood a silent Omega who'd learned to sing. And a stone-hearted king who'd remembered how to feel. 6 months later, the Moonspire Citadel had become something unprecedented in the Five Kingdoms, part royal palace, part academy, part sanctuary for those touched by wild magic. Seraph stood in what had once been the washing hall, where she'd hidden for 7 years, now transformed into a training space where young voices learned to harmonize their curses. Focus on your breath, not your fear. She instructed a group of 5 students, ranging from 8 to 16 years old, all showing signs of primordial magic awakening. Your voice isn't separate from you. It's part of you, and like any part, it responds to your intention. She demonstrated, letting her voice emerge in a controlled frequency that made the air shimmer without breaking reality. Young Lyric, now her most promising student, tried to match the frequency. Her voice created shadows that danced across the walls, forming shapes, birds, flowers, geometric patterns that shouldn't exist in nature. Better, Seraph praised. You're giving your chaos purpose. That's the key, not suppressing the wild magic, but directing it. Footsteps in the doorway announced Aldrich's arrival. 6 months had softened some of his stone-cold edges without completely erasing them. His heart still ground more than it beat. But the rhythm was steady now, reliable, a foundation others could build upon. His eyes, once flat as painted stone, now held depth storm clouds with lightning, capable of rage and joy and everything between. Your Majesty, the students chorused, bowing with varying degrees of grace. Just Aldrich here, he said with a hint of amusement. In this room, we're all just students of balance. He looked at Seraph. The delegation from the Western Territories has arrived. They brought 17 children with wild magic manifestations, seeking enrollment in the academy. 17. 6 months ago, there had been Seraph, Aldrich, and Nyx. Now, over 200. Students called the Citadel home, learning to transform curses into gifts, to balance wild magic with intention, to create harmony from chaos. Tell them we'll make room, Seraph said. Then, to her students, practice your breathing exercises. Remember, control comes from understanding, not fear. As they left the training hall, Aldrich took her hand, a gesture that had become natural over the months, his stone-cold fingers interlaced with her warm ones. The Noble Council wants another meeting. Lord Cassius says some of the traditionalists are getting nervous about the pace of change. Seraph sighed. The political battles were harder than the magical ones, in some ways. Teaching cursed children to control their voices was straightforward compared to convincing nobles to accept a world where omegas could wield power and alphas could admit vulnerability. Let them be nervous. Change is supposed to be uncomfortable. They walked through corridors that had become familiar no longer, the servant passages where she'd once hidden, but the main halls where her presence was not just tolerated but expected. Servants greeted her with respect, nobles with wary courtesy, and the children with pure adoration. She'd become a symbol, the silent Omega who'd found her voice and used it to save a kingdom. In the courtyard, they found Nyx working with a group of older students, teaching them the mathematics of chaos, how seemingly random patterns could contain hidden order, how destruction and creation were different faces of the same force. She'd transformed over the months, her appearance solidifying further, while maintaining that otherworldly quality. She looked almost human now, except for eyes that still held collapsing stars. The Western children, Nyx called out, seeing them. I already assessed 3 of them. 2 chaos singers like me, 1 earth voice who makes stone dance. They'll need specialized instruction. Can you handle it? Aldrich asked. Nyx grinned, and it lit up her face. I've been teaching chaos to choose its own order for millennia, apparently. Just took me a while to realize that's what I was doing. She sobered slightly. But we need more instructors. The 2 of us can't manage hundreds of students, not if the numbers keep growing. I may have a solution, came a new voice. They turned to find a woman in her 40s approaching, her bearing aristocratic but her eyes kind. I'm Maestro Celeste Harmony, formerly of the Royal Conservatory in the Eastern Kingdom. I've been teaching voice and music theory for 20 years, and... She hesitated, then continued firmly. And my daughter was one of the Nightingale Village victims. I've spent 7 years hating the curse that killed her. But after hearing what you're doing here, I realized hate doesn't honor her memory. Teaching does. Seraph felt emotion tighten her throat, a different kind of constriction than the seals that had once held her voice captive. I'm so sorry for your loss. Your daughter. Melody. Celeste said. She was 6. She wanted to be a singer like her grandmother. Tears glistened but didn't fall. I can't bring her back. but I can help ensure other children with dangerous voices learn control before tragedy strikes, if you'll have me. Yes, Seraph said immediately. Goddess, yes. We need all the help we can get. As Celeste went to meet the students, Aldrich drew Seraph aside. Are you all right? Hearing about one of your victims. I'll never be entirely all right with what I did, Seraph interrupted gently. 300 deaths don't vanish just because I found purpose. But maybe this is how I honor them, by ensuring no other cursed child destroys everything they love because they didn't have the training to control their gift. They climbed to the highest tower, the same one where Aldrich had first brought her after claiming her in the nullification chamber. The view had always been breathtaking, but now it held new meaning. Below, the citadel bustled with life students practicing in courtyards, instructors guiding lessons, nobles and commoners, mixing in ways that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Do you ever regret it? Aldrich asked quietly. The claiming, the bond, giving up your anonymity? Seraph considered the question seriously. She could feel their bond like a physical thing, his stone heart grinding in rhythm with her voice's frequency, two curses permanently intertwined, neither completely themselves anymore but both more complete together. I regret the 7 years I spent hiding, she said finally. I regret not seeking help sooner, not trying to find others like me, but regretting you? She turned to face him, placing her hand over his cracked stone heart. Never. You taught me that curses are just power without purpose. You gave my voice meaning beyond destruction. You saved me, Aldrich countered. From being a statue ruling a kingdom. From forgetting what it means to feel. His hand covered hers, pressing it harder against his chest. My stone heart beats for you now, literally. If something happened to you, then our students would carry on, Seraph interrupted. Nyx would teach them chaos become choice. Celeste would teach them control, and the world would keep transforming, keep balancing, because we started something bigger than just us. A commotion below drew their attention. A carriage bearing royal insignia from the southern kingdom pulled into the courtyard, and from it emerged a woman Seraph recognized from intelligence reports, Queen Isolde the Flameheart, an alpha whose temper was legendary. She was accompanied by a young girl, perhaps 10, whose hands left scorch marks on everything she touched. Another student? Aldrich observed. More than that, Seraph said, reading the Queen's body language. That's her daughter. Queens don't bring their heirs unless they're desperate. They descended to greet the unexpected visitors. Queen. Isolde's proud face showed cracks of desperation as she bowed barely to Aldrich. Your Majesty. I've come seeking aid for my daughter, Princess Ember. She's cursed. Fire voice, the physicians call it. Everything she speaks burns, destroys. I've tried suppressants, silent spells, iron muzzles, nothing works. She's hurt 3 servants and nearly killed her betrothed. The princess stood silent, her young face twisted with shame and fear. Seraph recognized that expression intimately, the look of a child who'd been taught to hate their own power. May I? Seraph asked, approaching the girl slowly. When Isolde nodded reluctantly, Seraph knelt before the princess. Hello, Ember. My name is Seraph. I killed 300 people with my voice when I was 17. The blunt admission made Isolde gasp, but Ember's eyes widened with recognition, not horror, but understanding. Someone else who knew what it meant to be a weapon you couldn't control. I spent 7 years silent. Seraph continued. Hiding, hating myself, believing I was a monster, and you know what I learned? I was wrong. I wasn't a monster. I was just powerful without guidance, dangerous without purpose, destructive without direction. I burn everything, Ember whispered. Her voice barely audible. Everything I love. Now you do, Seraph agreed. But fire that destroys can also warm. Can forge. Can illuminate darkness. The difference is control, and control comes from understanding, not fear. She stood, offering her hand to the princess. Stay here. Learn with the other students. We'll teach you that Fire Voice isn't a curse, it's a gift that hasn't learned its purpose yet. Ember looked at her mother, hope and terror warring in her expression. Queen Isolde's face worked through a dozen emotions before settling on reluctant acceptance. How long? As long as it takes, Aldrich said. Some students master their voices in months, others take years, but they all learned that being different doesn't mean being broken. As the queen left reluctantly, repeatedly looking back at her daughter Seraph took Ember to meet the other students. Within an hour, the fire-voiced princess was laughing, as Lyric's shadow voice created shapes that danced through Ember's flames without burning. Two curses that should have been solitary, isolated, dangerous, learning to play together instead. That night, Seraph and Aldrich stood again in their tower chamber, watching moonlight paint the transformed citadel silver. "We're building something impossible," Aldrich murmured. "A world where curses choose to be blessings, where wild magic works with order instead of against it." "No," Seraph corrected, her voice harmonizing with the ever-present hum of his stone heart. "We're building something necessary." The goddess's rigid order was always temporary, a stopgap measure to prevent chaos from consuming everything. But rigid structures eventually break. What we're building is flexible, adaptive, strong because it can bend without breaking. She leaned into him, feeling the cold of his stone heart and the warmth of his slowly healing flesh. "We're building a world where the next cursed child doesn't have to choose between silence and destruction. Where power and vulnerability can coexist. Where an alpha king can admit his heart is broken and an omega servant can shake the foundations of reality, and both are celebrated for it." "And if we fail?" Aldrich asked. "If the traditionalists push back? If the wild magic becomes too chaotic to balance?" "Then we adapt again," Seraph said simply. "Balance isn't a destination. It's a continuous process of adjustment, recalibration, choosing harmony over and over, even when discord would be easier." In the training halls below, 200 students from across the 5 kingdoms slept peacefully, their curses quiet for the night but not silent, never silent again. In her private chambers, Nyx worked on curriculum for the next term, teaching chaos, the mathematics of choice. In the Southern Kingdom, Queen Isolde lay awake, wondering if she'd made the right decision, while her daughter dreamed of fire that warmed instead of burned. And in the highest tower of Moonspire's citadel, a silent Omega who'd learned to sing, and a stone-hearted king who'd remembered how to feel held each other as the moon traced its arc across the sky. They'd started as curses, his grinding stone heart, her destructive voice, 2 prisons wrapped in flesh and magic. But they'd become something the goddess's ordered world had never imagined, proof that curses could choose to be blessings, that wild magic could find purpose, that balance was stronger than hierarchy. The old world was ending, the new world was just beginning. And at its foundation, stronger than stone, more beautiful than any song, was the simple truth they'd discovered together. Sometimes the most dangerous place to hide is in silence, and the bravest thing you can do is let your true voice sing even if it shakes the foundations of reality itself. Because reality, they'd learned, could handle a little shaking. It was rigid fear that crumbled under pressure. Love real, balanced, choosing love could weather any storm. Even ones made of stone and song, grinding hearts and crystal voices, destruction and creation finding harmony at last. The end was just the beginning, and the song would go on.